You've probably heard the term quantitative easing, or QE, thrown around a lot. But what is it really? Well, it was the radical, kind of controversial plan that pulled us out of the 2008 financial crisis. And whether we realize it or not, it has secretly shaped the entire economy we're living in right now. So let's break it down. Seriously, have you ever looked at mortgage rates over the past decade or so and just thought, wow, money is practically free? Or maybe you've wondered why the prices for houses, stocks, and pretty much everything else just seem to explode. The answer, for the most part, leads right back to QE. All right, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to walk through 5 key parts. First, the crisis that even made this necessary. Then, the unconventional idea of QE itself. After that, we'll see how it actually works, dig into the controversy it kicked up, and finally, look at its biggest side effect, the age of asset bubbles. To get QE, you first have to picture the utter chaos of 2008. The entire global financial system was teetering on the edge of a cliff. People were terrified, so they stopped spending. That meant prices started to fall, which is a really dangerous spiral called deflation. And the central bank's #1 weapon against this, it was totally, completely useless. This nightmare scenario has a name, a liquidity trap. It's an economist's worst fear. You see, the central bank tries to get things moving by making money super cheap to borrow, but they hit a wall. Even when they cut interest rates all the way down to zero, nobody's taking the bait. The fear in the system is just too high. So yeah, the standard playbook, it was officially broken. The main tool in the toolbox, just cutting interest rates, had hit its absolute limit. Imagine a lever that's supposed to restart the economy's engine, but you've pushed it as far as it can go and nothing. The engine just won't turn over. They needed a new plan, and they needed it fast. And that brings us to the radical new plan. This was an idea championed by the Fed chairman at the time, Ben Bernanke. The thinking was, okay, if the interest rate tool is broken, let's just go around it. Let's try something completely different, something nobody's ever really done before on this scale. And that something was quantitative easing. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. QE wasn't about trying to get interest rates from, say, 0.1% down to 0%. That ship had sailed. The goal was way more direct. Just bypass that whole problem and pump cash straight into the heart of the financial system, the big commercial banks. So how in the world do you just inject money? It almost sounds like something out of science fiction. But the actual mechanics are pretty simple once you see them. It's all about unclogging the financial pipes to get cash flowing again. It all happens in 4 steps. First, and this is the wild part, the central bank literally creates new money out of thin air, just electronically. Second, it uses that brand new digital cash to buy stuff, specifically government bonds from the commercial banks. Third, all of a sudden, those banks' cash accounts are overflowing. And fourth, now that they're sitting on these giant piles of cash, they have a huge incentive to do what banks do, lend it out. And here you can see that swap perfectly. Before QE, our bank here has $100 million in bonds sitting on its books. After QE, poof, the bonds are gone, and they've been replaced with $100 million in fresh cash, which boosts their reserves all the way up to $110 million. The bank basically just traded a piece of paper for a pile of cash it can immediately start lending out. That's how the money starts to get into the real economy. Okay, but this massive rescue operation, it didn't happen without a lot of controversy. I mean, by stepping in and buying up all these assets, the central bank was getting into some very murky water. It raised some really serious questions about who exactly was being saved and why. You can really see 2 sides to this whole thing. The justification was pretty straightforward. We had to do this for the greater good, to stop the entire global economy from completely melting down. But on the flip side, you have what's called moral hazard. QE basically bailed out the very same institutions whose crazy, risky behavior got us into this mess in the first place. It kind of sent a message that if you're too big to fail, well, you can't really fail. And let's be honest, a lot of the stuff the central bank was buying, it was toxic, it was junk. In a normal, healthy market, these assets might have been worthless, and the banks holding them would have taken massive losses. But instead, the central bank swooped in, bought them up, and basically let the banks off the hook for their own bad bets. So, okay, the immediate crisis was stopped. The fire was put out. But this absolute flood of ultra-cheap money that was created to save the banks, it had to go somewhere. And where it ended up going created this massive, decade-long, and Well, potentially dangerous unintended consequence. First things first, interest rates didn't just stay low, they cratered to levels that were almost unbelievable. We're talking rates of 0.1%, basically zero. Borrowing money had never ever been this cheap in history. And that set off a pretty simple chain reaction. You have near zero interest rates, which leads to a massive surge in borrowing by everyone, from regular people to giant corporations. And what did everyone do with all that cheap money? They bought stuff. They bought assets. And that pushed the prices for things like real estate and stocks straight through the roof. And this wasn't just happening in one place. It was a global hunt for returns. I mean, if your savings account is paying you nothing, you're going to look for other places to put your money. Everyone started leveraging this cheap debt to buy assets, hoping they would go up in value. We saw it in real estate markets everywhere, the US, Europe, Israel. We saw it in stock markets that just kept climbing. The result? If you already owned assets, your wealth just skyrocketed. And if you didn't, you got left further and further behind. An entire decade of investment was built on this foundation of cheap money. Which leaves us with the big, critical question for our time. Quantitative easing was the tool designed to rescue us from the 2008 crisis. But by flooding the world with a decade of ultra-cheap money and fueling these enormous asset bubbles, did we just sow the seeds for the next financial crisis? That's something we are all about to find out.